Today's episode is brought to you by the Vegas Bear Guys and 2AT Fitness. The Everything Sequel podcast contains explicit language, and I will not go to my room. Hello and welcome to the Everything Sequel podcast. This is a Friday the 13th edition. Today, we finally get to talk Jason X. My name is Michael Shantz of the How Dare You Awards. Joining me, the man pushing me out into space, Tom Stewart of Lonesome Whistle Productions. Say hello, Tom.
Oh shit, I forgot my arm.
That was a great moment, that arm.
Yeah.
Because the fingers were actually kind of floppy one way, and they actually moved the other way. It was a great piece of prosthetic makeup or whatever.
Well, even the sort of, the ironic commentary, it's a great example of like keeping that at the edges of your film without it consuming the rest of the movie. Mm-hmm. Like, that's actually a hard balance to get right. And I feel like however it came about with taking multiple passes at the script to change the tone, I feel like it really pays off, because there's a great moment around the same part of the movie with the pilot with the Stetson, who we don't see much of throughout the movie. At the end of a scene, he just kind of rattles off. He just sort of drifts off and just goes, "So lonely." Like that, and then the scene ends.
Yes, I remember that. Yeah,
and it's like that's how you do it. Like it doesn't affect what's going on in your movie, but it gives us an extra entertaining moment.
I gotta tell you, also, I saw that pilot with the Stetson hat, and I thought to myself, did Ridley Scott watch this film for Prometheus?
Sure,
because I feel like it's influenced him in some way.
I don't know if we could sustain that argument, but I have plenty to say about how this movie lifts from the Aliens franchise, but I love the idea that it might have also contributed to later films in the franchise as well. I like the idea that Ridley Scott's looking to Jason X to make an Aliens movie.
Hilarious.
Yeah.
Well, this is the tops for the both of us. Jason X.
Of cinema, let's face it. It is the best movie
ever. Well, it's a 2002 film directed by James Isaac. It has 20% on Rotten Tomatoes, sir.
Yeah.
So it's low, but rough. Higher than our last movie.
Yeah, it's not bad for a Friday movie, but just petulant. It's a petulant rating. That's all I have to say about it.
Well, it had a budget of $11 million, an opening weekend of $6.6 million. In the USA, it gathered $13.1 million, and in the world, $17 million. And, like I said, directed by one James Isaac, who I guess will be in our life again because he directed House 3, the horror show.
Not as catchy as The Second Story, right?
No, not quite as good.
Probably the best sequel title of all time.
So good.
In terms of puns. But they didn't want to keep the pun train going into the third movie, did they?
Yeah, well, that was the movie where I thought, okay, so I at least know the series if I don't know the movie. But he directed a movie called Pig Hunt, and I thought I knew a second movie when he directed something called Skinwalkers, when I realized, oh no, I don't know Skinwalkers, I know Sleepwalkers.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking of.
These are two different movies.
I don't think we should gloss over Pig Hunt though. What is
Pig Hunt? I don't know. I'd have to re-look it back up for you.
Well, given how much both of us like this, I think we should. I think we both might quite enjoy
venture
Pig
down
Hunt.
the road.
And he's another director that kind of stands out in the Crystal Lake Memories documentary as being an overall good egg.
Yeah, exactly. The back half of this series has, some
A thoroughly
some
good
well-meaning, some great people that were beset by the monetary restrictions that binded them, but kept in good spirits, did what they wanted to do. And they're like, your fandom's reaction is fandom's reaction, but...
I feel like his self-criticism is the least warranted of all the directors that we're talking
Absolutely.
about, though. I feel like he did a better job than he gives himself credit for.
I think so, too. And that was one thing where...
They moved this whole franchise to space,
Mm-hmm.
right? That's no mean feat. And they actually did it in a way that is, for want of a better word, adept.
I'm going to show you that.
Wow.
That's the Pig Hunt poster.
For the listener,
Yeah.
Mike has just shown me the poster of Pig Hunt, which is exactly what I was expecting it to be. It's
What
a
I
big
wanted
pig.
it to be.
It's a big old pig that, at some point in the movie is going to get hunted.
It's sitting over rib cages and skulls.
Okay. Oh, wait. So, wait. Now I'm confused. Is it a pig hunt or a pig hunt? Is the pig hunting or are people hunting the pig? I assumed it was people hunting the pig.
Yeah, that's how it starts. It says when John takes his friends to his deceased uncle's remote ranch or cabin to hunt wild pigs, it seems like a typical guy's weekend. But as John and his crew trek deeper into the forest,
Typical guy's
as they get deeper into the forest, they begin tracking the awful truth about his uncle's demise. I gotta watch this movie.
I think, yes. I think you need to bring back the How Dare You podcast just to cover this movie. It's got everything.
Please.
That's wonderful. I gotta say that blurb is really tantalizing. Like I no, sometimes when you get to movies that let's face it are not like top of the line movies,
Right.
their blurbs are terrible. That's a really good. Like I'm genuinely interested in the premise of that movie as set out in that blurb.
Right. And like, look, this guy had, I think one of the reasons he was hired was because he's no slouch in a special effects department. I mean, later on, he was working on movies like Existence with a Z on the end and Virtuosity.
That's
But
one of my favorite Cronenbergs.
Yeah, I mean,
love that movie.
Look Who's Talking, House 2, The Second Story, Enemy Mine, Gremlins, Return of the Jedi.
Wow. Well, so he worked on, like, he did the baby mouths? He helped with the baby mouths? And
I don't know. I just says special effects, but I assume anything special effects related, he was involved.
He was digitally maintaining John Travolta's hairline the entire time. Okay, well, yeah, that's really good context because, I'm a fan of most, if not all, of those movies that he worked on. So
yeah, right.
Oh, good for him. And and he worked with Cronenberg, and Cronenberg lent him his. When this and Existence kind of made simultaneously. I think.
Yeah, I think it. Ooh, was that 93?
Existence is like 99 or 2000, I think.
Oh, okay. Oh, I meant 2003.
Well,
no, yeah, it's 99. So it's 99.
Well, that was when this movie was shot.
Oh, that's true.
So I wonder whether it was a trade-off of if he lent him his crews, Roger Corman style.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that makes it even better.
Yeah.
I noticed that there's the guy who plays at one point let's just call him the principal, because to all effects, the professor guy, who's basically the space version of the principal from Friday the 13th Part 8. When he sends like a video message to the guy that he's gonna sell Jason to.
Yes, right.
That guy's in Existence as well.
Okay.
He plays one of the video game characters, and I think he's in Crimes of the Future as well. So he's like a Cronenberg repertory company.
Regular, yeah.
Yeah, regular.
That guy who plays the teacher, Professor Lowe, Jonathan
Professor Lowe,
Potts. It was so funny to watch him in this movie because I literally had encountered him just days before watching Totally Killer.
Oh.
Which is a Back to the Future inspired horror movie that I quite enjoyed. I don't mind saying.
Interesting. It's on Prime, right?
Yeah,
currently.
Correct. Yeah,
because Prime keeps recommending it to me because I've fucked my algorithm with all the movies I've watched for this fucking podcast.
Yeah.
My algorithm is forever fucked now.
You're fine.
Oh no, I love it.
Well, we're still at New Line, and my note is we start with credits in the bowels of hell.
Well, yeah, and it's not the New Line logo that they use for horror films. Interestingly, it's just the regular.
It's just the regular
New Line logo. Even and no horror music. It's just like the sort of
right.
Which makes me think that I'm about to watch like a house party or something. Like it's nothing about the logo says that it screams horror movie at all.
No, yeah.
And in a sense, this isn't a straightforward horror movie either. It's as much a science fiction film.
No, yeah.
A space opera. Yeah, we begin. Well, my first note is we begin in CGI hell. So despite the time lapse that they're leaving. We're picking up conceptually from the end of the last film, because the end of the last film saw Jason being dragged to hell, and they're using developments in CGI technology to represent the hell from which Jason presumably returned from at some point before the beginning of this movie.
Yeah, and you know what? based on the effects that you're seeing, I think my note for the last movie was actually this movie, because this is the one that feels even way more Hercules, Xena, Warrior Princess than that movie.
Yeah, but, CGI works for hell.
Mm-hmm.
It's a good use. Hell is a good use for CGI.
Yes. Well, especially when it's just sort of emblazoned all across the screen without putting actors in front of it or trying to set any kind of your story within it. You're just getting credits and hell. You're fine.
But it's a Batman '89 reveal as well, isn't it? Because it's not actually hell. It's the inside of Jason's body.
Yeah, exactly.
Also, so there's that influence. There's obviously digital technology and the changes that's brought about in what you can represent on screen. But the definite influence of TV shows like Crime Scene Investigation.
Oh, okay.
And how they would take those, those internal body shots.
I saw different influences. I put down that these are credits that are Inner Space mixed with Lawnmower Man.
Well, that basically describes how the graphics in CSI are, essentially.
Okay.
And
I never really watched CSI, so.
Well, anytime they do like a forensics examination on a body, we go inside the body,
right,
and we see everything Fantastic Voyage style inside there with early CGI graphics. Okay. So this is definitely the time for that. And also, early credit check, they put digital and video effects right up in the titles.
Mm-hmm.
Which I suppose, when the film has been nothing but that so far, it makes sense that you would credit it immediately.
Also, credit check, I think this is the first time Kane Hodder is top billed, right?
Oh, okay.
I think we talked about that earlier, but I'm...
black mark against the movie.
But I'm pretty sure that, I don't know when I had it earlier, but he's the top of my notes written down.
Yeah.
And top of IMDb, he's first. So I think I remember watching one of these movies and going, ooh, Kane Hodder first.
What they should have done is given David Cronenberg undue billing for his cameo, and then you might be fooled into thinking that it was a David Cronenberg movie, because if he would be the first name that comes up.
Right.
but the music is said to be by Harry Manfredi,
Mm.
and I don't know that's just whether that's just because you hear the signature sting that he wrote. But this soundtrack, for the first time in this series, sounds more like Danny Elfman or John Williams, that kind of orchestral
Mm-hmm.
soundtrack, which is a big change for this series. We haven't had like a neoclassical soundtrack yet.
Sure.
So either Harry Manfredi has kind of switched to that mode, or they're just crediting him having come up with the music originally. It's difficult to tell.
Right.
And like any skip ahead to the future, it's announced by a luminous computer command text on the screen, right? That's how you do it.
Always.
So we're straight. I mean, it's, I like that it's not being cagey about its transformation into science fiction. We're laying out all the trappings of science fiction from minute one.
Oh, I gotta tell
that's
you.
what I really, really appreciate about the movie. To be
me too. But I haven't had a as good a laugh as I had in a while when I saw Crystal Lake Research Facility.
It's fantastic. Yeah,
It's so good.
yeah, it is.
This movie tells you exactly what it's gonna be with that one shot.
Yeah, yeah. And then we get Jason as a Hannibal Lecter style prisoner, which
Very much, yeah.
it's not a look we've seen on him so far. I mean, I guess when he was under the lake, but this again feels more like, Silence of the Lambs, or, like the idea of him as a prisoner
Mm-hmm.
in a facility, in a high security facility. That's what they're going for.
Yeah. Well, plus they seem focused on his one eyeball on one side of the mask. It looks like one side of the mask has cloth over it and the other has his eyeball where he's just, mad dogging that fucking guard.
Well, that's how you direct Kane Hodder. You cut out the head entirely and just focus on the eye.
Yep.
Whatever he does with his head, therefore, doesn't matter. And this is, burying the lead. This is David Cronenberg's part of the movie.
Love it.
I mean, you couldn't get a better evil scientist.
Yeah, right.
If you cast an actual actor. And I know he's done some I mean, he basically is an actor. He's done enough on-screen work. I mean, he was a series regular in Star Trek Discovery for 2 seasons. Playing actually, I can't tell who the character is a spoiler, so I can't say anything about it. But
Okay.
pretty important legacy character to Star Trek that he's playing, but you don't realize it's him until the final episode. Yeah. But also, the cine literacy of horror that is suggested. I mean, obviously he and the director have worked together before, so they have that association. But it's a way to kind of frame your horror movie in a way that tells you that made by someone who understands horror movies, if you're putting Cronenberg front and center. And
Right.
even obviously we talked about how, he demanded a on-screen death. But even the nature of the death that he gets tells me that it's a Cronenbergian style death, because it's all that penetration anxiety of his films. He gets kind of like almost like anally raped kind of moment. And I'm just like, that's pure Cronenberg. All the penetration angst of his body horror is present there as well. So it's not just, he's got to have an on-screen death. It's like, we've got to get one that's both fitting of this,
right.
of his legacy, both as a filmmaker and as a horror stylist.
Let's Videodrome this shit.
Absolutely. So I love this section
Also,
of the movie.
I think it's Cronenberg himself that says, "Hey, we don't need to take this fucker to the Scranton facility." I just thought it was funny that we were trying to move him to, the location of The Office. Pre-Office. Yeah. So I wanted that theme song to just bust in that moment,
Somebody must have done that. If anyone cared about Jason X, someone would have done that as a YouTube mashup. Oh, you can imagine him in the office, like, like putting a machete to a photocopier, or just like the, the shot from the opening titles of Dwight with the blowtorch on the handle, but it's just him with a machete. Yeah, and there's a lot of this scene of like efficient exposition. Spins the mythology without retconning anything, which is actually very hard to do, because they say and these lines were kind of mocked, I think, by fandom in general.
Oh, really? I don't remember.
Cronenberg Cronenberg, as the evil scientist, sort of says we need him for research on how you regenerate tissue.
Yeah,
and that works both in the story, because then that gives you a reason as to why they're transferring him, because that's always the question in the Halloweens. It's like, why are you moving Michael?
Why are you moving Michael?
Usually it just
comes down to somebody saying, that's the law.
Yeah, right, exactly. But here they've got an actual reason, which is like, no, we need to move him to a facility where we can study this.
Yeah.
And I love and again, it's sort of like, if you're gonna go science fiction, then give us a science fiction reason for Jason. Like, we've had the gothic horror explanation, we've had the paranormal explanation, we've had the Hell's Buttworm explanation. Let's give it a sci-fi spin, which is that he is this kind of miracle of biology that needs to be studied for future research. I really like that turn.
Yeah, I did too.
Because I think people mock it, go, "Oh, this was never in the mythology before." I'm like, well, yeah, but now it's the future, and it gives them an excuse to
look how late we are in the series.
Yeah,
exactly.
And we got some good sneaky Jason Voorhees here with the switch out.
We do indeed. I thought the same thing. When the guard just approaches with the blanket, I'm like, don't do that. Just let him look at you from a distance. What are you doing?
I also like the idea that he just doesn't want to look at him.
Yeah,
like he's just freaked out, but he's like
just a little too much
over. Yeah, and this is good because having made him a prisoner, then you can combine your first kill with the escape, which is
right.
And again, riffing off Hannibal Lecter and the way he gets out of a similar situation. I mean, Jason doesn't Leatherface him, but put his skin on his face.
Yeah.
But that would have been great if he put the guy's face on his hockey mask and you could see the hockey mask.
You can see it underneath.
Yeah. Dave, you got a lot more holes in your face than you normally have. And also it's an off-screen death.
Yeah, right.
Which is the bread and butter of the series, I think, is that we actually don't see the deaths, and that's kind of been forgotten in trying to sort of graphically over-represent the kills. We forget that a lot of the original kills were off-screen kills, and I love that we start with one of those. It feels actually very authentic to the series.
Feels authentic to the series, and like you said, it almost feels like it gives it an in media res kind of moment.
Yeah.
In the sense of we're not fucking around with trying to build a moment of suspense. We're we're launching right into it. We're the sprinters coming out of the blocks.
Efficient, yeah, it's efficient too.
I did wonder how he got that machete.
Sure.
Just has it.
They have to work. That's the one thing they have to work very hard to.
It was like at the guard's desk.
Well, like to anything that is analog, they have to work really hard to find a way for Jason to be analog, right?
Yeah.
And they do. They come up with ways. They make the. It's interesting as well as how this just feels like, and this is where it feels very Canadian to me. Like they're not. Even though they've gone into, it's clearly the future. We're not quite sure how much in the future is, and there's no kind of period markers because this is temporary future. We're going to go into permanent. We're going to go soon.
Much further.
So they play their cards close to their chest. This just feels like the set of any early 2000s Sci-Fi Channel TV series. Probably is, to be fair, given the Canadian context of it all. And I think Rowan comes, like, she's the best final girl we've had for a while, and
I agree.
because we're in science fiction, she can die in this opening scene and still come back as the final
and still
girl.
come back and help out. Yeah.
And her death is, I described it as death by purple filter. She seems to really take a turn for the worse when that purple filter hits her. But she's shown both to be more capable than we're used to women being in the series.
Mm-hmm.
Not always, but sometimes. But more capable than the male-led science and military personnel that we've seen
She's
so
the
far
smartest
in the movie.
person in the room, which I like.
Which is great, yeah. I mean, looking back at what's happened both within science and military since then, it's like, that's not hard. But
right.
maybe it's different in Canada. I don't know. But I just love that I love both that they're able to kill her in this opening scene so they can have her as, like, the first person to get killed in the cast. But because it's science fiction, they can bring her back so she can be the final girl as well. They know what they're doing in this movie. I don't think that's been given credit.
I agree.
Even
Not nearly enough credit for this movie.
Didn't think they would know. But the people making the movie didn't seem to think they knew what they were doing. And I think they're just
I know,
wrong.
that's crazy to me.
They instinctively were making all the right moves.
But I said that about in the ranking episode, I said about that one actor who she said, they said it was this, they said it was that. That's what I like about it. That's what works, you know? And she was hitting the nail right on the head, you know?
I think so. So we get another jump forward in time. This is 2 time lapses in the first few minutes of the movie. And it's kind of like, to me, this is where... Go on.
Well, I was just going to say, I know that it's been a while. They let us know that it's been a while because there's lots of cobwebs on the stairway.
There's cobwebs, yeah, that's great. A lot of like spirit Halloween cobwebs everywhere. Yeah. But it felt to me like they were kind of, it was like a speed through of Alien and Aliens in this first portion of the movie.
Yeah, right.
Basically, they do the whole first Alien, and now we're into the Aliens part because we're the post.
I have the same notes. Yeah, totally. But I also said this is where I came up with my main idea for this entire movie was that, and I know I mentioned it in the ranking episode, but the idea of mixing Dawson's Creek with whatever's going on with a Jason movie and a space movie.
Definitely.
Because everybody, all the kids in this movie feel like they're straight out of Dawson's Creek.
Yeah. When they I mean it's sort of you're either, I think originally I thought it was like social satire of the future, that these kids were like the experts, like basically it's like Idiocracy, so like the highest office in the land has the dumbest people, because that's what it feels like, because the first few people to speak are the dumbest people there. So I'm going to be like, oh, are they all supposed to be this dumb? Is that the general level of intelligence here? But no, it turns out that it's just the dumbest people speak first. But it's also, it's not just alien in structure, but also content. So this idea of the team coming in, discovering the frozen body, one of them's an android.
Yes.
And, up to this point, Jason was supernatural and paranormal, and now he's been recoded as a science fiction archetype. And I really appreciate that shift. And I really appreciate, for the first time they're thinking about trying to keep away from the problems of the present day they've established in their own timeline. So it's just like a time lapse and then another time lapse. Let's just get as far away from where we ended up.
They even mentioned, because somebody doesn't recognize what Jason's wearing, and they say something about the outline hockey.
Isn't it great?
It's so good.
It's some, that's exactly, there's some some Idiocracy style social satire of the future in there. I love that. There's several touches.
And then of course there's the comic cutting off of the arm, which was your quotable.
And this is great because it shows exactly where science fiction changes the rules of the slasher about who survives, who can be resurrected. Because the technology of the age that the series is now in means that And it's established in these scenes that you can repair and resurrect basically anyone. So,
Right.
and there's an argument to be made that affects the stakes of the movie somewhat, the dramatic stakes, because no kill is final.
Mm-hmm.
But I err on the side of it allows you to do more with the characters you've got, and it's a good hybrid of the two genres.
Mm-hmm. I remember having
that's
that conscious thought, though, halfway through the movie about, well, how dead is dead in this movie?
Not dead at all, basically.
Yeah, right.
And not just with Jason, that's usually the case, but the characters too.
Yeah.
And so, in a sense, it becomes a competition to like who can get to the resurrection machine quickest.
Yeah,
because the sort of,
right.
Is what the stakes of the movie become.
It's a race to the nanobites.
Yeah, and as I said, Earth is now this permanent dust storm, and they don't bother
Right.
to kind of. It's really interesting. Like, you think they do all the exposition world building here, but they actually wait a bit.
Yeah, right.
So we see it through Rowan's eyes, which is smart because
That is
she's
smart, right? Because she's the outsider.
She's
us.
a historical fish out of water.
Yeah.
Well, I wouldn't go that far. I mean, she's also from the future, but she's as close to us as we're going to
She's
get
as
in
close.
the story.
Yeah, she's
Yeah.
the surrogate us. Come on.
Yeah, she's the surrogate of us. So it was smart for them to wait. That's good screenwriting to wait on that, because they could
Yeah.
have done all this as ADR as they're going into the spaceship, but they resist the urge to do that.
Well, not just the
And I gotta-
spaceship. I wrote down that they load her up into the ball sack spaceship
Yes,
because it just looks like a pair of balls hanging.
like Dr. Evil's rocket.
Yeah.
And another good thing about the production context of this film, making it all Canadian local hires makes for a more convincing crew of the spaceship, because they genuinely look like people who already work behind the scenes.
Yep.
You'll never confuse them with talent.
Yeah. Yes, exactly.
They look like crew. Even though they are talent, and it's
Well,
and,
I
you know,
wrote down that we kind of sort of meet the crew, including low rent Tony Todd.
Yes, Sergeant Brodsky, I think is his name. Is the character's name? He really is low rent. He's Canadian Tony Todd. As I say that, I'm not sure if Tony Todd is Canadian or not. But it's also like it's putting its, you know, it's what's the term, staking its claim as dirty space.
Uh-huh.
Which, you know, is a subgenre of space fiction that we're entering into here.
Sure.
I mean, it might not be Star Wars, but it's at least Space Truckers.
Mm-hmm.
That level of dirty space fiction.
For sure.
Yeah. And, the fact that this is actually the first time we're going to space. So, you know, Jason, this is where the cliche of when sequels run out of ideas, they go to space kind of
Right.
first comes into play, because it's not a foregone conclusion at this point that they're going to leave Earth, but they get in that spaceship and it's like, okay, then we're doing it. We're going
Here
to
we
space.
go. We're going to space.
Yeah. And as I'm watching, and it's good that they kind of built to this, because instead of starting with it, because at this point they've shown me enough for me to know this makes total sense, both in terms of the project of this individual movie and where we are in the series.
Mm-hmm.
But it takes that kind of, I don't know, like, not quite a first act, but like the first few parts of the movie to kind of get used to that. So it doesn't, like, I don't know how Leprechaun in Space begins, but I assume it begins with like Leprechaun jumping around, dancing around the space station, going ta-too, ta-too, ta-tee, or something like that. But something
Or
inelegant.
dancing around on Earth in the first 2 minutes, and then you get the light, like fire in the sky
Yeah.
light that just whoop.
That's totally, without ever having to watch that, that's exactly how it begins. But here, they get to the point where you're sort of like, this feels vaguely organic, the
This
way the
feels
story
natural
is going.
for some reason. Yeah.
We're going into space, but it doesn't feel like that much of a leap. And it helps that everything is digital. I think, going back to your Xena Warrior Princess note, I think I agree with this. How things look in television and how things look in movies at that time should be different, and perhaps the problem is that there's too much crossover. As when we talked about the Star Wars prequels, I prefer my CGI to feel like one uninterrupted kind of strip of CGI, so you can get a sense that the whole world is like this, rather than it being these little interruptions of digital space.
Right.
And this movie's definitely got that. When you're in space, it's full on. It's computer graphics everywhere.
Yeah.
So, and I guess, that they couldn't have made this movie even 2 years before.
No, yeah, I don't think so. Well,
I mean, they could do it with models, I suppose, but I don't think their budget would have stretched to this if they didn't have CGI to play with.
Yeah, but I'm thinking of no. I guess I was thinking of Matrix, and that's '99. But so much of that is more practical than. It's like when you get into the sequels is when the CGI really dumps into those movies. So yeah. Maybe you're right. All right. Well, we're on the ship. We're about to revive some patients. Why don't we take a break and come right back?
We got to my first quotable, so that's a successful segment.
Done and done.
We just went full circle.
All right. We'll be back, everyone, right after this.
I like to think I know something about beer, but nowadays even I get overwhelmed when confronted by the exhaustive selection of craft beers they have at bars, breweries, and even grocery stores. Back in the day you had one, maybe two craft beers to choose from, and if you were confused, you ordered a Guinness. But in beerstinations like San Diego, the craft beer options lately are in double, sometimes even triple digits. So what's a beer drinker to do? You need what I need, the Vegas Beer Guys. Your beer of choice should be a perfect blend of malt and hops. And so a live show about beer needs that same balance. And the Vegas Beer Guys matches beer expert Dan Aker with self-proclaimed beer novice Stephen J. Weiss. The results are eminently drinkable. They're on Facebook, they're on Instagram. They'll try new beers, they'll tell you about beer. Think of them as your beer Sherpas guiding you up a foamy-headed mountain to reach the peak of your pint. God, I need a beer.
And we're back, ladies and gentlemen. Tom and I are here discussing the 2002 epic Jason X, directed by one James Isaac. He died young, by the way. He died at 51 or something like that. Yeah.
That was so sad at the end of Crystal
Such a
Lake Memories
bummer.
when they do In Memoriam. And it's never the guy you expect. It's never he's the healthiest looking of all of them.
Right. He looked like, it was funny because he actually looked like a high school jock had grown up and, become a director.
Sure.
All right, where were we? I said, I thought it was funny because they load them up and the movie kind of goes out of its way to get a lot of science talk in there because this is the movie's says to the audience, we're not forgetting this is science fiction. We're gonna get our science talk in. Let's go.
Yeah, your classic technobabble. You can't do science fiction without it.
But meanwhile, what they really need to do is try to defrost the two people they picked up, which are Jason and Rowan.
Yeah, and to your Dawson's Creek point, I've one of the things I really admire about this movie is how fluidly they managed to terraform this crew of
misfits.
I mean, they're at some point it seems to suggest that they are just high school students on a field trip.
Yeah.
And that's just what the future's like. Everyone's just doing everything in spaceships now.
Mhm.
Although there is Earth 2 as well, but we'll get to that later.
Right.
But it was just like, I don't know if it's because, like, by the early 2000s, grumpy old men like us are starting to go, like, oh, the world is run by children now, and
Yeah, right.
like the movie In the Loop, where the Prime Minister's special advisor goes to the White House in Washington, and there's this teenager who's giving him the tour around, and he's just like, can your dad give me the tour? What are you... So there's that, but I just think it's sort of done, like, to establish them as a spaceship full of horny teenagers, like, is done really well, and that you would miss that because that's what we expect from a Friday the 13th movie.
Mm-hmm.
And I like that they give us that, and they work on giving us that, despite the fact that it doesn't kind of make too much sense as to why there's this, this kind of high school field trip going across space.
Yes.
But also, like, again, like, the design of this movie is heavily criticized, even by the people who designed the movie, especially, in fact, the people who designed the movie.
Right.
But one thing I really like about the costumes are those curve-cutting sweaters,
Yes.
because it keeps the autumnal quality of the series intact, than being in some kind of a future sweater.
Yeah.
I was just like, we don't have Camp Crystal Lake until the end of the movie.
Yeah.
So we've got to have some nod to, it being like full.
That's
at
funny.
The lake.
Yeah, that didn't occur to me, but that is funny. I just thought...
And it just, all those little touches really add up to me.
Really? The general note about the costumes to me were that they were... I did have the idea that they were trying to keep something more earthbound.
Yeah.
Within, but yes, like everything else, keep it Dawson's Creek.
Yeah.
But what I wondered about was how well is all of this working in space for you exactly? The midriffs showing, the
Oh yeah.
It
doesn't add up.
Yeah, it felt like unprofessionalism was abound on this ship, where he just gave up trying to keep them in their uniforms.
That's interesting, yeah. They purposefully, like, ripped rips out of their clothing to be more like they're from the early 2000s. But essentially, it's interesting you bring up Dawson's Creek, because definitely that's what you would latch onto in that time. But that is kind of like a non-horror version of Friday the 13th in many respects. There's a nod. Another thing I think this movie does really well is it kind of skims over past the mythology of past movies. So that as they're examining Jason, they talk about how he has a small brain.
Yeah, I noticed.
So they're keeping alive the idea that there's this slow child inside
of him. Yeah,
inside the hefty stuntman killer body, which is not quite, small boy covered in toxic waste, but it's in the same wheelhouse.
It's around it.
Yeah. And this is where we see the nanobots go to town on people.
Mm-hmm.
And it looks like any injury can be reversed by covering the body in a series of ball bearings. And this is where I first made the note. It's like, doing this on a regular basis might harm the film's stakes.
Well, but I also I had the note that I'm seeing kind of classic screenwriting in the sense of we're going to introduce something that will come back later in a different way. Something that you see as helpful here, reconnecting the cut off arm of the computer whiz kid, loser kid, whoever he is.
Yeah.
And my note is, like, later when we see the nanobites slowly crawling out towards Jason's corpse, I think to myself, that feels like classic gothic horror of, oh no, we're in trouble.
Yeah.
He's gonna reanimate.
But the whole impetus for this movie is just that they took the Frankenstein idea from Part 6 and took it down a science fiction track. And let's not forget, I think it's been reinterpreted as gothic horror, but Frankenstein the novel is the first science fiction novel.
Mm-hmm.
So you can go two different, and adaptations have gone two different ways of it. More have gone down the gothic horror route and turned it into that. But it's also a science fiction story, and it's just it only takes that sort of that generic nudge to bring it into science fiction. And they play with all of that here, having him resurrected here, having him turn into Space Jason or Spacin by the end of the movie. They're using the themes that are already there from at least part 6 of Jason and using it to kind of form their science fiction story. I think it's great.
Absolutely. And there was one thing in particular I really respected about this movie. They waited as long as possible in a natural way in the movie to tell us what year it is. They wait until Rowan wakes up. Yeah.
Yeah. This is like, we're finally doing dates. I thought the reason they hadn't said anything was because they learned their lesson about creating timelines, but
that's all bets are off.
Yeah. But centuries have passed, so they're kind of, it's basically a new timeline at this point. Mm-hmm. So they can that gives them license to do whatever they want with what happened in between. It's also that kind of weird byproduct of having like negotiating between two different future time periods, is that now the character, like Rowan, sees Reanimation, she's like, oh my god, it's amazing, and everyone's like, that's old news.
Yeah, right.
And so it's sort of like having something so far in the future that it now seems like old hat to characters who are from our future. Is kind of,
well, this is also the moment
they thought
where...
that through. I don't think they thought through that.
And well, this is also the moment when she wakes up and they tell her that she's aboard the Grendel. And my note was, the writer thinks he's very literate.
Yeah, it's better than Lazarus.
But you know who the writer is?
No,
because he's been in my life before.
Okay.
His name's...
You said that as if he was your life partner.
No. His name is Todd
benefits
Farmer.
for me and my life partner.
His name is Todd Farmer. He actually plays Dallas in this movie. He's the tall, bald guy with the goatee.
Oh, yeah. He's the guy who's really down on the movie in the interviews.
Yeah, well, was he? Yeah, I guess he was. Yeah, he was. Yeah. You're right. But he is the writer and sometimes star of My Bloody Valentine in 3D, which I did with Lady Chu on the How Dare You podcast. And he also wrote Drive Angry, which we did on that podcast. So,
oh my.
And he was the guy that
And this is the movie he thought didn't work of all of the
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Dude did Drive Angry, and I guess he hadn't made it by the time he did that documentary, though.
Well, what's funny is that I remember watching My Bloody Valentine 3D, and there's a character, I can't remember if she's like a stripper or a hooker, but, this actor is just completely nude and then hears noises outside and just walks outside and then starts getting chased by the killer completely in the nude. But she was supposed to be having sex with a character that Todd Farmer was playing, and I thought, I'm going to give this guy some shit for writing that nonsense into the script that he gets to do.
I remember you talking about that, yeah.
And then it turned out that it was all her idea. I remember reading in the IMDb notes, like, she wanted to do this, and she talks about it, and...
Sounds like The Mother in The New Blood, if you get my drift.
Well, I guess we'll have to reserve judgment.
It's called Stockholm Syndrome, is what it's called. No, he comes across as another good egg.
Yeah.
Just I get the sense that the whole experience just depressed them to the point where, any watching it back or thinking about the movie in any way just immediately is like PTSD for them, and
he's like, fuck.
Yeah. Well, this is so riffing off the last movie where Jason has sort of become a celebrity serial killer.
Mm-hmm.
it turns out that in the past few centuries, he's taken his kill total to nearly 200 people.
Yeah, right.
And
So
I didn't.
my note was that
so is
there's.
the
Well, I just remember thinking because he's talking to. What's that guy? Is he lying down in bed the whole time he's talking to him?
Yeah, they both are.
Yeah. But I just thought it was funny that this guy in 2455, my note was, he has an awful lot of information about Jason Voorhees.
Right.
From hundreds of years ago.
Yeah, but it's you have to have a big enough number where he would still be remembered as a serial killer.
Yeah, right.
And haven't bothered researching that number. I assume that they didn't pick it completely at random. And I wonder whether it's like, when you go into a coffee shop and you order an Americano or something, and they say, "Do you want room in there?" And I wonder whether they said nearly 200 because the actual kill count is like 90, and they're like, "We want to give Jason some room to maneuver over the next few centuries." So anyway, it's an interesting moment, and Professor Lowe, the characterization is really good because he feels like a camp counselor as much as any of the previous archetypes did, and yet he's the sort of, I don't know, teacher, the spaceship teacher. I don't know what his
spaceship
job
teacher
is.
Sounds very accurate, doesn't it?
Well, he's a ship scientist who teaches.
Yes. Yeah.
And then we get into what I've termed clamps and champs. He gets so it's a total reenactment of the scene from Jason Takes Manhattan with the biology midterm.
Mm-hmm.
Except that the difference is he's openly into it to the point
yes,
where
right.
He's getting dressed up with it, and
yeah, he's a big fan of those nipple clamps.
But I just thought it was interesting that they went back to that well, as if there's potential there in that sequence, but I don't think we fully realized it. It's like, what an odd thing to go back to out of everything that's been done so far in the series. But I'll to give them, maybe they're vindicated because it is better handled for sure.
It is, yeah.
I still don't know whether I would have gone back to this particular sequence, but
sure,
they do a better job with it. And there's all sorts of Blade Runner things going on.
I think because they're cross-cutting too.
Yeah, they got
they have nipples, the fake nipples on boobs. They also are that one scientist officer
nipples.
Is
cutting
into Jason's face around his mask, which is actually
there's the. Mm-hmm.
They actually managed to get simultaneously a little bit of body horror along with some pretty good tension, because I'm kind of freaking out in the moment while she's cutting him. I'm like, oh, don't do that. Do not do that.
And to your earlier point about a lot of even digitally led cinema, even like the Phantom Menace, still has a lot of practical work in it. So this, the eyes and the brains is practical horror.
Mm-hmm. It's
also very Blade Runner. With the dry ice in the eyes. And we're cross-cutting between the kinky sex and also
Jason waking up.
Jason waking up, and a third element of it is the robot designer trying to put nipples on his sex bot.
Mm-hmm.
And I gotta give credit to the Foley work in this scene. The clank of the robot nipples to the floor is great. And it struck me that this movie, between the bright colors and the robot nipples, this is Joel Schumacher's dream. This is what Joel Schumacher's Batman movies were all about.
He's all about it.
It's interesting. This was like a deep cut, which I don't think it was an intentional reference, although this movie has a kind of horror cine literacy that kind of makes me sometimes wonder whether it does. But the Professor Lowe is dressed in like a purple slip, which immediately I was like, okay, so this is an outdated idea that anything kinky is trans and vice versa, right? That results in and then I was like, well, this goes back to the original proto slasher Psycho. Is this the same idea, right? Anything to do with perversion is trans and vice versa. So I wonder whether it just kind of inherited that kind of dichotomy from there. But it obviously stood out to me in 2024 because I'm like, he can be kinky and not want to dress up in a purple slip, you know. It doesn't have to be both. But this is what.
Well, because we're coming up on. Rihanna... Oh, go ahead.
Well, this is. Is this no? I think we're too. No, never mind. Go on. I'm jumping ahead.
Well, because one of my next notes is, you know, when Jason does wake up.
Yeah, well, that was what I was getting to. Yeah.
And we get to, I think, one of the best kills in the whole series.
Oh, yeah, smashing the frozen face.
Frozen face kill is fantastic. Well, just watching the Camp Crystal Lake memories about how they put that shot together, not the smashing of her face, but the actual freezing of her face. Mm-hmm. And all the prosthetics that they had to do and actually add CGI to actual regular makeup effects and practical effects. Like, you know, we've talked about it before with like Terminator 2 and the blending of those and those coming together well. So in a movie where it doesn't always look like it's not Terminator 2 level.
Right, yeah.
When it comes together well, it stands out. It looks fucking amazing.
I really like it. I think it's the best kill in the movie. I think it looks good in general, like overall, in it for any Friday film, but particularly for this film, it's conceptually the perfect kill.
Yeah, it's the highlight.
You need the cryogenic technology for the kill to take place in the first place.
Yeah,
but it's also gory and heart pumping.
Mm-hmm.
So it's got body horror, it's got science fiction. It's the perfect marriage of the two.
It's a good blend, right?
It works within the aesthetic of the movie, and every kill in a Friday the 13th should, or in a horror film should, and this definitely does. And this is where they have to work hard to find a way for Jason to have an analog weapon in a digital age.
My note was
one of the.
Yeah, I wrote down he finds a medical machete.
Yeah, exactly. It's a part of the mortuary kit.
Yeah,
that he has to use to make his machete. And also, so I wasn't jumping ahead too much because he's woken by the kinky sex, right? That's his that kind of
his anger inducing.
Yeah, that's it. So that is that, and they talk about this in Crystal Lake Memories that cross-cutting makes it clear that that's what's going on here, and clearer than it's ever been.
Nobody has sex on my watch.
But I think,
I made
pretty
him
much.
Colonel Clink all of a sudden, but
I'm not actually Colonel Clink. But I think again it's right for this movie because we need something to wake him up, to resurrect him.
Yeah.
And I think within the kind of self-conscious humor of the movie, it works as well.
Yeah.
Like pointing up the kind of montage between the two shots.
Yeah.
And this is where we learn that there's an Earth 2.
Yes.
Which doesn't have anything. I assume for copyright reasons is not the same Earth 2 as the TV show which was on the air when this came out.
Right.
Or they were building another crossover. I don't know. Maybe they were just like, hey, get some of that Earth 2 money. Because if Earth 2 is the Earth 2 from the TV show, then that's where Jason ends up. So
right.
You gotta have a spin-off Jason in Earth 2. And this is where there's more. We delve more into the Crystal Lake research facility at this point. Get a lot of interim storytelling. We also recap all the different ways that Jason's died in previous movies,
right?
Which I think is great. The idea as well is it's like a history. It's like it's like a history lesson that also includes stuff that happened in the Friday the 13th movies. And they're given equal importance, as they should.
Yeah. Well, and one thing that caught me right in this area is that there's sort of a certain amount of not necessarily murder mystery, but you always have people dying, and the rest of the campers or the rest of the group or the rest of the kids are caught unawares. They don't even know that they're gone. But
yeah,
to some to different effects, they're either looking for them or they're completely forgotten about in certain movies. But there's that sort of mystery feel of what's going on here. Something doesn't feel right. And then in this movie, in this moment, you know, because Rowan is saying, the fucker's loose. Like, we're in trouble. It's Jason. And what's his name? The professor says, all right, show me Jason. They go back and it's just immediate body bag. Like, they know immediately that, okay, we're fucked. Like, this is turning into a different movie. But this movie's equipped to do that because now we're going to unleash the army dudes.
Yeah, well, it's so it's so interesting what you're saying, because that, I would call it, you're right, murder mystery, that kind of haunted house aspect of the movie, that comes from Alien, which in itself is a slasher in space. It's it's John Carpenter's Halloween in space, and so that generic transference has already been made, and the movie's picking up on that. But it itself is coming at it from the other side, where it's trying to transpose a slasher back on to that design, onto the design of an Alien or an Aliens film. Which, you know, the introduction of the Marines at this point, you know, is kind of, again, another handing the gauntlet from Alien to Aliens. We've had the haunted house part, the alien part of the movie. Now we're into the Aliens part of the movie. Yeah, so there's a whole kind of there's a sort of dialogue going here. Also, again, like, we're half an hour into the movie and we're just doing introductions for some of the cast members. This is where we do official introductions for everyone.
Right.
And again, I think, you know, it's good screenwriting. Like, you learn about the characters before you meet them officially. Because you've established the characters already, and now it's just sort of like introducing everyone to each other. A screenwriting, though, like, this is better science fiction than the Star Wars sequels, because they plumb forgot that Poe and Rey hadn't met. And this movie remembers who's met who at any given time. But you mentioned the "Show Me Jason" line, and of course, what we've got here is the continuation of toxic male hubris that we've seen from Bad News Cruise, from The Principal in Jason Takes Manhattan, from Culp in Jason Goes to Hell, and so Professor Lowe is our, what do you call him, the big dick of the movie?
He's the asshole.
But it hits, like, it's kind of like the idea that toxic male hubris is still going to be there in future centuries hits even harder now, when it seems to, you know what I mean? Like society seems to be going more towards that. Like in 2003, I would have been like, well, you know, the future's going in the right direction, and this kind of toxic masculinity will dissipate. And of course, the next 10, 15 years beat me around the head with toxic masculinity to the point where
this is what we want. This is what we value.
We're still gonna have to deal with dicks like this probably in 4 centuries' time. Yeah,
probably.
I'm sure. And then the whole, I'm so glad that Crystal Lake's Memories is in my life, because my instinct was, when I saw the kill with the mechanical doors, that my first instinct was, why don't they use these mechanical doors as part of the kill? And then you watch Crystal Lake Memories, like, they were going to do that, but they found out it was too complicated, so we just ended up walking through the doors. I'm like, but that's just using it like any door.
Yeah, I know.
Every door opens and there's someone there. You're not really leaning into the space of it all.
No, not nearly enough.
If you're just using a mechanical door as any analog door. So I knew something was up. I was like, this feels like a missed opportunity, and it was an opportunity that they purposefully missed.
Yeah, that they just couldn't complete.
But I like the, and again, this is very Cronenbergian, the conflation of, and very Friday the 13th, the conflation of sex and violence, because that's a real cum splatter of blood she gets on her face.
Mm-hmm.
And she says, like, particularly she says, "Baby, I'm not ready yet," and then she
Right.
gets the cum, so it's like a kind of premature ejaculation sort
Yeah.
of moment with the blood. And I think anyone who worked with David Cronenberg is capable of that. Capable of that dimension, I think.
But going back to Camp Crystal Lake Memories, if I recall, they say something akin to, "That's not what was supposed to happen. It wasn't
Yeah.
supposed to be that,
Yeah.
forceful, and
That's
it
right.
wasn't supposed to go directly into her face and eyes."
Yes, that's true. But they kept it in the movie.
Oh yeah. I think the actual quote was, "It was too good not to keep."
Yeah, I agree. 100% agree. Well, we've talked a little bit about Star Trek, and here
Now we're going to go to the VR room.
the holodeck. Yeah, the holodeck. We get the video game holodeck monster, which introduces. I mean, like you say, this is interesting because you mentioned the setting up the nanobots and letting it pay off later. This sets up the final gambit
Yeah,
of
right.
the movie, which is to kind of distract Jason with VR, and it's kind of seeded. It's seeded here, and yeah, it is something that doing the movie in this time and place and in this genre is going to give you that's extra that you've not had before. That you're not able, a dimension you're not able to play with, which is this meta quality of like dying in fiction versus dying in reality.
In real life.
Yeah.
And I like that it's funny because I liked it a lot because as it first starts up, the look of it, I was like it reminded me of sort of Croft Superstars, like Sigmund the Sea Monster, kind of level quality. And I thought to myself, what's going on here? But then when you add the aspect of these guys are playing the game on this holodeck within space, and then the really interesting part was the idea of them getting their own heads chopped off, but only within the game.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And seeing them go, "Oh, come on, what's going on here?" and turning the game off, and that aspect of it made it way more interesting to me.
Definitely, yeah. It is more interesting, and it's rather than just introducing digital effects into the movie, it's a commentary on how digital effects are different.
Right.
The meta quality of that, like discussing it within the world of the film, and yeah, the two levels of when Jason is killing people, he's only killing digital effects, and vice versa. They think he's an avatar, so he's real, but they think he's an avatar, and then Jason is killing the avatars that he thinks are real. So it makes it a really interesting scene. Also,
Absolutely.
in the middle of the scene, there's such a metatextual line, which is where I think it's the kid whose arm comes off. He's like, "I think we need to reboot."
Yeah, right.
So there's a kind of a growing knowledge of like of the sequelness, like a self-consciousness about what they're doing with the series, and commentary on the trends of sequels.
Absolutely.
Using the idea of video games as the metaphor for that. Like,
as the metaphor.
Yeah.
But then I also found my mind creeping into the past, because this next scene of Jason sort of dispatching the army crew one by one reminded me very much of First Blood Part 2. Rambo First Blood Part 2. It had that feel and quality to it.
It did, and the idea of space soldiers is a subgenre of its own in science fiction, isn't it? Because it's like from Aliens to Starship Troopers.
Sure.
And this, again, it's like the movie knows it's horror, it also knows it's science fiction. To tap into this.
And then let me ask you something else, because I think this movie does a pretty good job towing the line, because it feels as though they're making Jason the hero, but not to the extent where the movie isn't in a place that it shouldn't be.
Right. Yeah.
And that doesn't seem like an easy thing to do.
No, I think I think they get the balance just right.
Yeah, that's it feels pretty deft, actually.
Mm-hmm. And we get it's interesting. You have the very meta scene of the VR of the holodeck, which by the way looks like the holodeck in on the Enterprise when it's not on,
Yeah.
and it's just a series of grids. Except it seems to be a series of grids all the time, so it's like a non-functioning holodeck that they're in. But we also, when we meet Crutch, who is the sort of the sort of mechanic guy,
Yeah.
and the genetic designer girl, they're like paying homage to the people who work in the Creature Workshop and horror movies. Clearly, like the way everything it looks like the Creature Shop of any horror movie. So again, back to that, the characters who are like Tom Savini style makeup artists, like like one of the many Tommy Jarvises.
Love it.
In the series. So there's on a metatextual level, I think there's a lot going on in this movie, and obviously the ending of the movie will hit you over the head with it, but it's going on. There are undercurrents of it beforehand, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and something I like the alternation of practical and digital. Like when they do the First Blood violence, it's mostly practical, but then if it's something that they need digital cinema to do, like the revolving drill bit, like having the body spin around on the drill bit,
that
it comes across as absurd and otherworldly, but it's kind of supposed to.
Yeah, I think it's balanced
it's not
pretty
meant to
well.
Look realistic. Like that's not meant to look realistic, but the violence is meant to look realistic.
Yeah, and I don't know. You're getting over the top kills, but things that make sense in, like you said, like in a Starship Troopers kind of a way.
Mm-hmm.
But it it's an interesting mash of different things because we're getting to the point where we're getting the multiple kills moment that we get in earlier Friday the 13th moments.
Mm-hmm.
But we're still doing it within the genre of science fiction and in that Aliens kind of a way, which I think it's pretty smart.
And then you've got the frosting on the cake, which is the humor, which is punctuating everything. So I'm glad they went back and did a screen pass on it. I think it really helped the movie. And we've been speaking up for a lot of the digital effects, but I do have to say when we get to the sequence where the spaceship's crashing into the space station, this is where the limitations of digital effects begin to show, because that flying glass don't look right.
No, yeah, I know.
Even within the entirely digital world they've created, it don't look right.
I think I just simply said not great on effects.
Yeah, that's true. Also, I was about to criticize in my notes. I was about to criticize them for writing in the research station, because effectively they should be alone in space if they're going to go full alien.
Yeah, right.
They shouldn't they should be cut off from everything. And then of course the first thing they do is blow up their research station. So it's like, oh, they knew what they were doing. It was deliberate. They wanted you to give you that false hope of. It's like the cops, right? When the cops drive away.
Exactly.
When the cops go away on their low, it's like, oh, okay. That's like there's
Love
nothing,
it.
There's nothing left.
Well, I mean, we're right about there where they're crashing in and destroying another substation in space. Why don't we take a final break and then we'll come back and finish up?
Yeah, and I'm going to come back with a question for you.
Ooh.
That may blow your mind.
Terribly exciting.
Although, if it's like any of the other questions.
Well, bear in mind, mine is smaller than the average man's.
At least your eyes are in the right place, then.
There you go. We'll be right back, everybody. Does the coronavirus have you feeling oogie? Have you been sitting on your couch for weeks? Nay, have you been sitting on there for months? Well, it's time for you to get back in shape. Check out 2AT Fitness. You can find them on Instagram. You can find them on Facebook. 2AT Fitness was started by Tina Bernard. She is ready and raring to go to help you get back into the shape you want to get into. They've got all kinds of classes. They've got outdoor in-person classes. They've got online classes if that's what you prefer. Ladies and gentlemen, it's time to get back in shape. You're going to find a variety of exercises. You're going to have strength training, cardio, weightlifting, even fun 5-minute burnouts that will push you to your limits. So get off the couch, get into shape. Go ahead and check out 2AT Fitness. Tina Bernard has got you for all your needs. I know her personally. She's fantastic. You're not going to meet a better person to help you become the new you. Check it out. And we're back, ladies and gentlemen. Tom and I are here finishing up talking about Jason X, the 2002 film directed by James Isaac. Had to go back to the notes. Yeah. That's a bummer.
It is. But, you know, he left behind this and Pig Hunt. His body of work speaks for itself.
That's all we needed. Where were we? So we got to this point where we go to Solaris. Again, I think Todd Farmer was making himself. It's like, I'm smart, motherfuckers.
Yeah, yes, I've seen good movies.
They blow past it, and they get their damage reports. And then we get, Jason's banging on the door, I believe. And we get a good old classic Jason banging through the window moment.
Yeah, they can still do that in space.
Yeah, love it.
Well, but I have a question.
Yeah. Oh, that's right. You had a question.
It's at this point, though. On Rowan's shoulder, you can very clearly see a vaccination scar. Now, was this on purpose to show that she is from the past? Or is it just accidental and they forgot to take it into account?
Oh.
Because if you think about it, it's the perfect way to show the distinction between the two time periods that they're from.
Yeah.
My sense, but it's so prominent. It's so prominent.
My sense is that it's an accident, though.
I think so too, but I like to think that because it makes total sense.
Yeah.
Because originally I was like, oh, why would she have a vaccination scar in the future? She comes from the before future, where they may have still had
vaccinations, right?
I have like Dawson's Creek and like most movies starring teenagers from this point. I struggle to keep track of who is who of the young people. And there's a moment here where I see two of the women I thought were the same person standing together, and I'm like, oh, okay, they're different people. That's good to know. It's good to know for the future.
Was it, wait, who was it?
I don't remember now. I didn't know then.
Yeah, that's true.
I didn't know then, and I don't know now. But I love this. Oh, go on. Yeah.
No, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, again, the Reese's style slasher science fiction marriage.
Mm-hmm.
The Professor Lowe's trying to reason and brazen with and bribe Jason.
I really like that moment.
Because he's like the Paul Reiser character in Aliens, essentially, isn't he? Like he wants to.
Right.
He wants to collect Jason.
He wants the money.
Gain. So he wants to make a deal with Jason, essentially, but it's like that world of dystopian science fiction full of these kind of corporate shills.
Yeah, but not just that. I think it also works on a level because what the aspect I like is that we as the audience know something that the character doesn't, right?
Well, right, and that's the slasher element,
so you're waiting for the shoe to drop.
Yeah. In the slasher, the conventions of slasher is that you can't reason with them. They're unstoppable.
Yeah.
They don't care about money. They don't care about reason. So you know where this is going, but the genres are kind of playing off each other in this moment. And they do it off screen as well.
Yes, they do.
Yeah.
Well, you hear the scream, but I'll give credit to Todd Farmer because I really like that line. guys, it's okay. He just wanted his machete back.
Yes.
He
With
thinks
Jason
he's
right
safe.
behind his head.
Yeah.
And that's a much better way of doing it than actually seeing him being beheaded.
Right. There's a couple
And
good
there's a-
jokes I kind of like, because I think right after
there's
that
a
is
great
the
one here. My favorite.
What's a bike?
No, that's good. That's really good too. Is that
I
now
like
as well?
What's a bike. Yeah.
What's a bike is fantastic.
Somebody
I've
says
forgotten
something about a
about that.
bike, and someone says, "What's a bike?"
Well, because at one point Rowan says maybe he could just beam us off.
Oh,
And
that's
then
right.
when
Yeah.
they turn around and go, beam us off.
Beam us off.
And I loved it because again it goes back to her being the anachronistic fish out of water, but it's also a metatextual Star Trek reference. And for some reason the phrasing makes me think of what's his name, Bill O'Reilly, his tirade.
Oh.
Play us off? What does that mean? Has that happened yet? To
I
play
don't
us
know.
off? What does that
That's
mean?
great. Yeah.
It's no
Fuck it.
words
We'll
on it.
do it live.
Play us off? And I love that they have the android sexbot woman quoting the odds.
Oh, kissing her is raising the survival probability.
But it says like the logic of people, like she quotes the odds of everyone's survival, and it's like the logic of people in slasher films versus that of the robots of science fiction. Like the people in slasher movies have to suspend disbelief that statistically they're gonna die.
Well, but on top of it, because I love the idea of a human kissing her, which is, human desire
Yeah.
changes her to recompute the algorithm because she's gonna, take over, and that now the probability is going, skyrocketing because she's titillated.
Right.
I love that.
I like that too. And this is also where you have the great line about, which has not dated at all, where they talk about the Microsoft conflict.
That's my next note too. The Microsoft conflict.
I mean, that was a reference squarely aimed at contemporary viewers, but that joke is even funnier now than it was then. It's
hysterical.
Because, tech...
Because he talks about how, we were beating each other off with our limbs in the streets.
Yeah! Because, as William Shatner prophesied, the next war will be a tech war.
Right.
I think they might have... I think they might have shit the bed when it came to the professor's head. When you finally see it, it doesn't look good. It's certainly not up to the standard of heads in this series. And they keep it out of focus and don't light it properly, which is always a dead giveaway that they're not happy with
that it's not quite as good as they wanted it to be.
Yeah. So, obviously, I love the fact that it's done off screen and we see it as a head, focusing on... Generally, this movie's really good at focusing on the after effects of the kill. Which, again, is a very alien thing, isn't it? You don't see many of those deaths happen in real time, but you see Ripley or others discovering them.
Yeah.
But I mentioned this scene in the with the airlock in the ranking episode.
In the ranking.
Even though it's set in an airlock, it's just flaky kids in life-saving in life or death situations. That's the bread and butter of Friday the 13th.
Yeah.
The airlock is just the science fiction gloss of what we're doing here. And then I guess we got to talk about Dominatrix Terminator. I mean, it's the most, I would say, in a movie that actually isn't as much of an exploitation movie as you think it would be, looking at it, looking in from the outside. This is the most exploitation movie moment.
Sure.
Of the entire movie. But again, it comes with a kind of meta comment about how female robots in science fiction have always been like male sex fantasy droids. Like all the way from Maria in Metropolis through to Daryl Hannah in Blade Runner.
Sure.
I mean, she even does the Daryl Hannah flip.
Right, yeah.
Later on. So clearly they're thinking about that lineage. But then the movie, just for a couple of minutes, turns into a first-person shooter. And I feel like I feel it's just like let's give the kids what they want, kind of, which is fine, you know. I mean, it's aimed at a youth audience. You want synergy with the arcade games that they're playing in the lobbies of the movie theaters before they go in. It makes sense. So yeah, and then Sergeant Brodsky's legs cut off, but so he doesn't die, but his legs are cut off.
Not Tony Todd?
That's not Tony. That's Canadian Tony Todd.
Okay.
So again, there's this growing consciousness of how black people are mistreated in horror movies.
Yeah.
So they make the decision to keep him alive and then
because I know that there's this
completely
moment where Rowan goes back for him.
Mm-hmm.
And then she has to find something else and then goes back and then he's missing. But when they finally do get him, like, he's got bandages on somehow.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, my note is when they get him into the resurrection machine, reanimating Brodsky, which sounds like a science fiction remake of Regarding Henry. But it's also, it's also like we can use science fiction to rectify problems of representation. Like, this black guy doesn't need to die.
He doesn't have to die, exactly.
In every other slasher, he'd die, but we can bring him back to life.
That's funny.
And then we get into Spacin'. X.
But like I said before, because she goes full first person shooter.
Yeah.
We have the sort of Ripley moment of her with her guns just blowing Jason away.
Mm-hmm.
But when that finally dead corpse is sitting on the spacewalk, but the buttons get pushed or whatever happens, I think there's a knife in them or something. There's an electrical short, but the nanobots come out. And you have that kind of classic...
nanobots do what they got to do. I don't think I don't even need to switch them on. I think if there's any flesh to be reanimated, they'll do it. I think.
I thought there was an establishing shot of the motherboard short-circuiting or a knife in it or something.
I thought part of the lore of nanobots was that they reanimate you whether you want them to or not. But that might be other. That might be other.
Maybe that's some other property.
Fiction, I think.
Yeah,
that's maybe Red Dwarf.
I would swear that there's like a color button change or something happens on the panel.
Yeah. I buy it. Yeah, if it involved colors, I'm sure it happened.
But this is one of those moments where I think they're going for, like you said. I think you said earlier, the lightning striking kind of moment. It's like a gothic horror Frankenstein resurrection moment. And it does work for me. That blend of material actually works for me in the moment. Because as they approach Jason and start getting into his body, I think to myself, oh no, those kids are fucked. Like, I worry for them.
Yeah. But it's an important shift in the representation of Jason.
Shifts the whole movie. Yeah.
Because so far he's been Encino Man in space.
Right.
Now he's a functioning part of the time, the place, and the genre. And this is, in a sense, is like how they can use reanimation to help with the stakes rather than detract from them, I think. Because now he doesn't have the disadvantage of being a man out of his time.
Right.
In the same way. Yeah, and then the robot is just a head, which, you can do the obvious blowjob jokes in your own head. Especially where he's holding her in relation to his crotch. But like I think this is another like the professor's head. This is a moment where I feel like they just not willing to do the practical work necessary, because instead of like having her, doing the Ian Holman alien thing of like having his head on the table and then clearly the actor's underneath the table with prosthetics on his neck. They just have the camera positioned so it cuts off at her neck so you can't see the rest of her body.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, come on. I mean, work harder. We need a freestanding head at the very least.
Do something.
And this is where they call the ship a boat.
Yeah,
And I'm just
right.
like, this is actually just Jason Takes Manhattan, a do-over.
Well, and I'm looking at my notes, and I think I know the women that you got mixed up, because there's the woman who accidentally blows the hull early, right?
Yeah.
Or rather, she gets on the life support ship,
Mm-hmm.
which ends up blowing up, like
Right, yeah.
going into the spaceship. And then there's the woman stuck during the hull breach. And I wrote a note that just said Janessa ! Because I think somebody yelled out her name, and I thought, Janessa? I haven't heard that name this whole fucking movie.
That doesn't even sound like a real name.
And it sounds so
like
Dawson's Creek.
Sounds like two people who've been shipped together. Yeah. And then we're into this causes a gravity loss sequence, which is like,
Mm-hmm.
I think this final act of the movie is about making sure we do everything in both the slasher genre and in science fiction. Make sure we've covered all the bases, because we've got to have a scene where there's no gravity.
Yeah.
Jason's in zero gravity. Yeah, and then we hear the sleazy robot designer guy say he's going to create a diversion, and having seen this film before, I'm like, I think I know what this diversion is going to be. Cause it's going to be, but
yeah,
we bring back the VR from earlier in the movie.
We love premarital sex.
Well, what I love about this is like I forgot this dimension of using it as a diversion in world.
Yeah,
because that's what really sells it to me. The fact that it's not, then that makes it not as indulgent as it could be.
Right.
Because the stakes are there, right? He's got to buy into this fake reality, and they have all the stuff with it. Oh, he just saw me. He looked at me and saw me. Like, so
I like that they have that moment where they say we got to distract him, and then he turns and walks the other direction. They're like, it's working.
Yeah, and it's played both for real and for laughs, and I like that interplay.
Yeah, right.
It also allows us to have at least one scene at Camp Crystal Lake, so it's using science fiction to kind of as a refresh point, kind of in the same way they used it in the beginning of the last of Jason Goes to Hell, because it's a simulation in the same way. And it says specifically Crystal Lake 1980, so this is original recipe,
yes.
But yeah, I wonder how much, because they mentioned DVDs earlier on in the movie, and I wonder how much they were thinking about the way in which technology's moved on, so that movies like Friday the 13th you can now pull up digitally and watch whenever you want in a way that you weren't able to do in the past. And again, that's a reference that grows and grows, because it's even truer now with streaming. You can literally summon it up.
Yeah.
Summon up Friday the 13th movie onto your TV out of nowhere. You don't even need a piece of physical media to do it. So
correct.
That when Friday the 13th suddenly appears as a VR simulation, it speaks to how we use these movies now in our own media.
Sure.
And that just keeps growing and growing. And obviously the parody of the dialogue is so funny that you just quoted.
It's really good.
But you know what really makes me laugh is the little touches, such as the girls getting naked before they get in the sleeping bags. That is a great choice. They get naked and then they get in the sleeping bags. It makes no sense. Except in the world of Friday the 13th. It's like going literally by the exploitation logic of the Friday the 13th series.
Well, and I'm retrospectively, I think I mentioned this in one of our episodes, probably the ranking. I ended up being sort of disappointed, but this was the first time I thought I was seeing somebody being smashed into a tree for death, and it just seemed like, again, it seemed like a joke
It was, yeah. It's
You know,
full on, yeah.
but I didn't
bashing
think
them about.
I didn't think they were hearkening back to something that had actually happened in the series. As a standalone joke, I thought it was one of the funniest things I'd ever seen. But I didn't know that we had a a part 7 where he actually tried to do this in earnest
Yeah,
as a kill.
yeah. So it's got all those layers, and also it's got that. We're in between in the world of science fiction. We're in between Westworlds.
Mm-hmm.
So we had Westworld the movie, and then subsequently we're going to have Westworld the TV series. But it's the same idea, even though it's explored comedically, of him just bashing those two sleeping bags against the tree and against each other. VR provides this safe space.
Yeah.
To indulge our immoral instincts of violence, and that I think that's interesting, because that's a self-awareness about what violence in video games or media more generally means.
What do they actually do to us?
Right? And it's what they reflect on in not in the original Westworld movie, because that's written and directed by Michael Crichton, who's a little moron. But in the TV series,
I'll add them to the list, Tom.
No, well, the TV series is J.J. Abrams, but I kind of quite like that. So maybe it ended badly, of course, because it's a J.J. Abrams production.
Yeah, it did.
It started off well.
That first season is gangbusters.
First couple, I thought were both pretty good.
Yeah, the second one's good too, but it's
basically whenever Jesse turns up, it's time to turn off.
Yeah.
It also is the point at which they leave Westworld,
mm-hmm.
which should be a sign that the show's over, but
right.
apparently not. So yeah, the first time I saw this movie, this was the standout sequence, and I think as much as I've learned to love other parts of the movie, this it always
stood out in my head, though. Yeah.
It will always have my heart as the finest moment of the movie. Mm-hmm. And I think, even down to the level that Kane Hodder's confused acting, which he does all the time, finally makes sense in this scene.
Finally works.
Because Jason is genuinely confused about what's going on. And it feels as much like a trick on Kane Hodder as it does on Jason. But every single time it gets me.
Yeah, me too. And it, in world it works as the diversion. They get their EVA.
Yeah.
And they fix the connection outside on the ship, thanks to not Tony Todd.
Yeah. I mean, this, you could dive even deeper than we have on this sequence, but the one last thing I wanted to say about it was it shows a self-awareness of this convention that Jason is stirred by premarital sex.
Mm-hmm.
And they've never, well, I guess a little bit at the beginning of Jason Goes to Hell, but they've never kind of sent up themselves doing this yet.
Mm-hmm. Right.
In the same way that they do here. So I think there is a difference in the type of humor it is. It's humor at your own expense.
Yes.
Is what gives it that extra layer of brilliance, I think. Anyway, that's all I want to say about.
Very good then.
But it's always been the reason to watch the movie. It's what I'm looking forward to.
Yeah,
from the moment I turn it on.
It's the one that me too. But I'll tell you, because they get into that tube, and then she has to go back for the robot's head and come back.
Yeah.
And so when they finally do get away, thanks to Tony Todd's heroic efforts.
Yeah.
And
now you're just calling him Tony Todd.
I know.
He's not Tony Todd. He's Canadian Tony Todd at most.
Not Tony Todd saves the day, and the ship comes
Naughty
away.
Todd.
But yeah, I had such a big laugh when the explosion comes and that sort of still Kane Hodder comes barreling right towards the camera.
Yeah.
It's such a real sublime moment of comedy to me, because it seems like an indictment of the actor himself. It's just doing no movement, like just silently moving through space. Like he just got lucky that the explosion was pushing him right towards them. Oh, it really got me.
I love that their thought process at this point is like, what do we need to have now that we've taken Jason to space? We might not ever come back here. What do we need to do while he's in space? So it's like, well, he's got to float in space and he's got to fight in space.
Yeah,
and it's
right.
like it feels like a wish list of what you would want to see in a Jason movie set in space.
Of course.
Like they asked a child what he wanted to see and then wrote it down and found a way to put it in the movie. And I guess, I mean, I don't know if I saw it coming the first time or even remembered that it happened, but it ends with him burning up in the planet's atmosphere and becoming a shooting star.
Yes.
Which two lakeside lovers point to in the sky.
Yeah. Like, I did not remember that was a part of this movie, and the idea that Earth 2 has teenagers that are just as dumb as we had on Earth 1.
Yeah, great. But it's it's another reset point, isn't it? Because it kind of starts all over again. When was Alien Resurrection? Because this, I think it was
97.
before this, right? Well, not too far before the making of the movie, but considerably before the release. Because they end in the same way. Although we never see Earth, we Ripley and an android. Again,
but they also have a similar
android.
Because the way the creatures dispatched in that movie reminded me of the girl being dispatched in the sucking through the hole.
Yeah. So it's a kind of reset point because this is Earth 2 and it's by a lake and they're two lovers. Mm-hmm. There's a sense of it. It's all the cycle's gonna begin again.
Yeah.
Which is a good way to kind of offset the continuity problems that you've simultaneously created and resolved.
Right.
With this movie. Yeah.
Well, that's about it, right?
That's it. Yeah, that's it. Yes.
All right. Well, give us a credit check, why don't you?
Yeah. So this is in every one of these movies, but it says based on characters created by Victor Miller, and it just struck me that this is the one film where the comparison is about as far removed from those characters as it's possible to be. This is why I think we're able to confidently say when this film was made, or at least a point at which it had to be made after, because it's the credit that reads Assistant Property Master Jeff Darth Maul.
What?
So, The Phantom Menace had to have been released when they wrote the credits this movie, which presumably is after they made it. Or they were using that nickname while they were making the movie, which means they must have seen Phantom Menace
Mm-hmm.
must have come out by that time.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it was right around. It feels like it was simultaneous, so you would have been seeing, like, if they were making this around '99 when that came out, mm-hmm. even if it was just seeing previews.
That's what I wondered, but on the strength of the previews, would they? I
don't know. It just depends on when they were filming.
He looked pretty cool in the previews.
I mean, Phantom Menace would
have
been released by May, so that's fairly early in the year.
Yeah. But I just thought that was interesting that we can actually date it.
Date it,
bit.
Yeah.
One of the credits reads second and third effects. What does this mean?
Well, the first effects are the nanobites and the frozen face.
Yeah.
Second effects feel more like the arm that was cut off.
The guy who did the professor's head.
Yeah, maybe. Yes, right.
And then the third effects is the guy who held the camera just below the android's head instead of giving her a prosthetic head. Also credited in the titles are the special effects company Toybox. And Toybox suggests to me this great depth of their of their work, but it also suggests infancy. So I don't know what the metaphor is in Toy Box. Each effect sequence has a different animator, but my comment was that it doesn't necessarily look as ragged as some movies where that is the case.
All right.
I don't feel like there's a disunity of special effects in the way
Agreed.
that there usually is when a different animation house does every individual sequence. I was interested to see one of the lead animators on the VR sequence had the last name Cunningham. And this just could be a coincidence.
Just a little nepotism going on.
Well, but also like we need to get a Cunningham in so he can sign off on the
next installment.
The credibility of this VR sequence of like this OG Crystal Lake look.
Yeah.
Catering by Buys Davids.
All right.
So the postmodern horror movie has a metatextual catering company because that's by Davids.
Uh-huh.
So catering by Davids basically.
Right.
There's a song on the soundtrack called X is the Loneliest Number, which I assume, I don't know if that's a re-recording of One is the Loneliest Number, but there's definitely a movie in the series which so far has the most awareness of itself.
I also noted that music-wise, this movie had, but it's only in the preview. I was always disappointed it wasn't in the movie, but the sort of death metal kind of music they have for the preview that just seems to match the tone, like well, Spacing's running around killing people.
It's definitely space and music, isn't it?
Oh, it felt so magical to me the first time I saw it. It made me want to go see the movie.
And it's not in the movie.
Yeah.
That would have been if he'd have come out to death metal. I think it would have been an even more powerful entrance.
More powerful.
Fact checker Maurice l'expliciteur. Okay, leaving aside the name, which is a bundle of questions that we don't have time to answer. What are the facts that need to be checked for this? Why is that a job on this movie? What facts do you need? You're making it all up.
Are nanobites theoretically possible? Let me check the facts. Yes.
Can tissue regenerate itself?
All right.
Yeah. Also, I was interested in the special thanks Pixar get a mention.
I didn't see that.
I don't know if they were at any point consulted, or is it just a general thanks to the possibility of digital cinema that Pixar created. But that is the end of my credit check.
All right then, sir. It's our favorite for a reason. I think this movie works.
Yeah, it's talking to you about it, I think, reminds me of how intelligent it is.
Yeah, I mean, I've given I had some jokes about the references that Todd Farmer gives the movie itself. To me, seems like an over. Like, I'm smart. I can do smart things, and I've read things.
Like Fredo. I'm smart, not like everyone says.
Yeah, exactly. But the funny part is the things where he's professing to be smart aren't quite as smart, but the other things he puts in this movie are smart. So
he just
didn't
can't
need
help
that
being
shit.
Smart.
Yeah.
Secretly smart, like Sylvester Stallone.
Secret smart, sir.
Secret smart.
Secret smart person.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's there's just so many, like if it was 2 or 3 of these kind of thoughts that I had while I was watching the movies that connects it to other science fiction movies or other horror movies or the idea of metatextuality, I would be like, oh well, I might be reading too much into this, but it's all the way through the movie again and again to the point where it's almost undeniable, like you're being made to think about those questions as you watch.
Yeah.
And I don't think a movie can accidentally manufacture that. It can, but not sustain it throughout an entire movie.
Yeah,
This, I
not
think,
throughout the
sustains it
whole
throughout
film. Yeah.
sustains it throughout the entire movie, which is why... Well, it's not just why I like it. It's entertaining, it's funny.
Yeah.
It's a pretty decent Friday the 13th movie.
Agreed.
Which is no mean feat when you're set in the future and in space.
Exactly right, sir.
Because that is not where Friday the 13th is set.
Is that right?
It's set somewhere between 1980 and 1970. And in Connecticut and or New Jersey.
Yeah. But you can't tell me that this isn't where it belongs.
Down lake from Manhattan.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, now is the time. You got to tell us what you think of Jason X. Are you with the 20% and us?
We're part of... We're like... You know, in some ways, it's like we're part of an elite.
Yeah, exactly. We know what's up. So what do you got to do? You got to find us on Facebook, find us on Instagram. Do not find us on X, but go ahead and send us a thread. Or send us an email to everythingsequel@gmail.com. That's it. When you hear us next, we will be talking Freddy vs. Jason, where this series has been trying to go for years. So
it's still gonna take a while to get there, even within the frame of the movie.
It's not gonna start at the beginning of the movie, just so you know. All right. That's it for Tom Stewart of Lonesome Whistle Productions. Michael Shantz here of the How Dare You Awards. We will be back. Say goodbye to everybody, Tom.
A box of DVDs is not a gold mine. You wouldn't be saying that if you went on Amazon Marketplace in 2024, I can tell you. Those sellers do quite well out of that business, I think you'll find.
Fantastic indeed. All right, everyone. We'll be back. Thank you for listening.
Yay!